that goes, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I realized I had to change course, so I quit my job, my career, and I found a way for student loans to help me help the world. Through MUM's Sustainable Living major, I learned that sustainability is about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I learned to be sustainable, a system must address the environment, the economy, and society. I learned what makes a culture strong and resilient is a diversity of healthy individuals. That's why Senator Bernie Sanders' plan for student loan forgiveness, college for all, and universal health care makes a lot of sense to me. Lifting the burden of debt so we can afford to purchase property and support a family, while enabling us to pursue careers we're passionate about without being tied to a job just for access to health care. Since before I was born, Senator Sanders has been advocating for truly sustainable policies. When I see him in the Senate and in presidential debates speaking truth to power, Bernie inspires me to do the same. If we're serious about ending the insanity of these current unsustainable systems, let's vote for a new course of action. We need a president who advocates for our country's social, economic, environmental issues so we can achieve college for all, Medicare for all, jobs for all, and justice for all. Please join me in this movement by voting for Senator Bernie Sanders for President of the United States. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Rosenberg.
I am Diane Rosenberg, and I'm here today as a private citizen, but one that knows a lot about the problems of factory farming. Iowa has a factory farm crisis. We have a water quality crisis, and for far too many people, factory farms cause a quality of life, public health, economic, and a community rights crisis. It has pushed too many traditional family farmers out of business. Big agribusiness corporations get the profit, and we, the people, get the pollution and a myriad of harms. Tell me, is this fair? No. I don't think so either. And neither do most Iowans. Many communities try to stop these confinements. 24 counties have taken a stand on factory farming with resolutions and letters. A factory farm moratorium bill had over 20 co-sponsors in the state legislature this year. But powerful agribusiness interests have massive financial resources and wield enormous clout. Laws are written favoring big ag, not you and I. And that is not right. We need new federal policies, like fixing the Farm Bill to repeal the guaranteed federal loan program that makes it way too easy to get a factory farm loan. Strictly enforcing antitrust laws to stop more consolidation, like the recent Bayer-Monsanto mega merger, and break up existing big ag conglomerates. And requiring factory farms and big ag to pay their externalized costs, like water cleanup and road repair. That falls on the backs of rural Iowans like you and me. And this brings me to Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie supports bold agricultural policy that puts people first because Bernie understands the problems facing rural Iowa. He gets that large-scale agribusiness interests are destroying the heart and soul of rural America. He cares that neighbors, families, children may be irreparably harmed by massive livestock factories. Not only does Bernie care, but Bernie is not afraid to speak truth to the power of big ag. Rural America needs Bernie Sanders. We need the heart and the strength of this visionary leader. And rural America, if we all stand together with Bernie, together we will all win. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Francis Dickey.
It's great to see so many people here tonight. Are you feeling the burn? We're here today because we know Bernie Sanders is a true progressive, and he's willing to tell it like it is. 4 years ago, Bernie was considered a long shot, but he quickly became very popular, especially here in Jefferson County, because he clearly expressed the ideals that we support. Things like that, like universal health care, and that if you work 40 hours a week, you should be able to, you shouldn't have to live in poverty. And we shouldn't let corporations and the wealthy buy our elections and write our laws. In the 2016 caucuses, Bernie got 73% of the Jefferson County delegates. The highest of any county in Iowa. But today, Bernie is starting out as the leading candidate, and with a network of over 1 million volunteers nationwide, his campaign, or our campaign, is a powerful grassroots effort. In 2016, Bernie's ideas were considered too radical by many. However, interestingly, today, many of the presidential candidates are running on Bernie's radical ideas of 2016. That's a good thing. That is a good thing, whether we or not we believe they may actually follow through on them. We do know that Bernie will, and that he's not wavered on these important issues for 30 years. What excites me about Bernie's campaign today is that he is again out front on important issues that are little discussed by other political candidates, such as the need to end our endless wars. And the Green New Deal, and the need to end corporate monopoly power over America's farmers. Because multinational corporations have sucked all the profit out of American agriculture. Farmers are going broke. We're seeing record numbers of farm bankruptcies, and the suicide rate for farmers is the highest of any occupation in this country, twice as high as that for veterans. So today, agriculture is not working economically for farmers, and it's not working environmentally for all of us. It's only working for the Monsantos and Cargills and Smithfields of the world. What we need today is Teddy Roosevelt-style trust busting to break the stranglehold that corporations have. And Bernie Sanders will be the president to do that, of course. And we need a Green New Deal, and it needs to include provisions for a fair price structure for farmers and to foster a regenerative agriculture that will protect our water quality and our air quality and will improve our soil quality and will sequester vast amounts of carbon in the soil. And of course, I believe that Bernie Sanders is the best candidate to do that, and I hope you join me in supporting Bernie for President of the United States. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Nina Turner.
Fairfield. Wow. It is so wonderful to be here with you. It's great to be back in Iowa. You matter so much. You know this. But for Senator Sanders and his campaign, it is bigger than just this campaign moment. As we all know, the senator has been such a champion for what is right, for what is just, and for what is good. And you know, he just recently had a conversation with a group of folks, some of the speakers, some of your neighbors who've had the opportunity to communicate with you this evening were in that room. But some of the things that the senator and I learned about what is necessary to restore the vitality of our rural communities. It is so vitally important, and it's so unfortunate. Dang, I thought they was going to have my cordless. Oh, they got my cordless mic. It's so unfortunate. You know, it's so unfortunate that in today's political climate, so many folks try to separate us. They want to separate us by age. They want to separate us by race. They want to separate us. Do you have a religion? You don't have a religion. Are you black? Are you white? Are you Latino? Are you Native American? Are you Asian? They always want to separate us. But the things that we care about, our quality of life, it doesn't matter if you live in Fairfield, Iowa, or Ames, Iowa, or Cleveland, Ohio, or Burlington, Iowa, Burlington, Vermont, Chicago, Illinois. We fundamentally want the same things. You want to be able to live a good life. If you have children, you want to know that your children will have a better future than you have. And while you're here on earth, we want to enjoy a little bit of that good future too. But my goodness, this movement that Senator Sanders started, and he will always say, it's not about me, it is about us. And when he says that, he means that. But this people-powered political movement is really about all of us in this room and the people who we represent who are not in this room. We are working, we are fighting for transcendence. So when Senator Bernie Sanders says that when he becomes the president, the next president of the United States of America, and that he will look out for the working class people of this nation from all walks of life, he means it, and he can't be bought off. That is the beauty. He is consistent. And he is consistent. I want to bring you a message tonight from two of my favorite people in history, and I have many as a history professor, but I'm really vibing with two right now tonight. One is Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, and the other is President Teddy Roosevelt. And Congresswoman Barbara Jordan said these words. She said, what the people want is very simple. They want an America as good as his promise. So the issues and the things that matter to you, whether it is fighting off big factory farms that are putting family farmers out of business, whether it's fighting off a corporate class that really doesn't care about the future of anybody else, only their money, and they don't care that they exploit and make that money on our backs and our necks. When you are fighting for clean water, for God's sakes, to hear some of your sisters and brothers talk about the manure that gets in the water, and to juxtaposition that with some of the concerns that our sisters and brothers in Flint, Michigan have, or Toledo, Ohio have, we know that we are in this together. We're in it together. So what you want, whether it's health care or college for all, trade schools, living in good communities, knowing that your property value is not going to go down because you can't sell your home because some corporate entity came in here and doesn't care about your quality of life. Whatever brings you in this room together, what the people want is simple. We want an America as good as his promise. And then President Teddy Roosevelt broke it down like this. He said, this country will not be a good place for any of us to live in unless we make it a good place for all of us to live in. That's what this is about. And that is why Senator Sanders is running this race. And you know what, sisters and brothers? After 2016, he had a big old movement and people caught fire. And folks said, you know what? Senator is right. The system is rigged politically, socially, economically, environmentally. He could have went back and just said, you know what? It's just about my home state. But he continued to be on the front line. What other presidential candidate do you know that was on the picket line with Verizon workers or with Marriott workers whose slogan was one job should be enough? What other presidential candidate do you know marched in Canton, Mississippi with Nissan workers trying to encourage them to unionize so that they could have better wages and work conditions? What other presidential candidate has been on mission who took on Jeff Bezos and said, you will pay your employees $15 an hour? Or when he said to Disney that Goofy and Daffy and Minnie Mouse are not that happy. This is not the happiest place on earth as long as you have workers who have to be subsidized by the government because their wages are not high enough. Who stood up? Who continues to stand up? Who is it that we can roll the tape 10 years ago, 20 years ago, been saying the same thing, has been on message the entire time? Man, that's the kind of president we want. And whether we always agree, one thing that you can count on is that when the senator gets to the White House, he will not forget who put him there. No other, in 2016, raising money with grassroots dollars. In 2016, it was $27. And in 2020, the average donation is $20. I think it's something spiritual about that. And now everybody that's running for president on the Democratic side of the ticket has to prove how much they can raise grassroots dollars. See, he was a visionary. He is still a visionary. And he stands and sets the pace. Y'all know the senator was a long distance runner. As Brother Cornel West describes him as the long distance runner for justice. As Michael Render describes him, a.k.a. Killer Mike, when he was asked, why is Senator Sanders the candidate to defeat President Trump? Killer Mike said these words. He said, you need Professor X for Magneto. And the way I describe Senator Sanders is that he has heart-soul agreement. We need more leaders with heart-soul agreement. The senator knows from a lived experience. He's a first-generation college graduate. His father came here from Poland at the age of 17 years old, escaping the Holocaust. The senator understands from a lived experience what it means to try to make ends meet every single day because he watched his parents do that, living in rent-controlled housing in Brooklyn with his brother. He understands from a lived experience that everyday people like you and like me, all we want to do is live a good life. And that's not asking for too much. And he is committed to ensuring that everybody from north to south to east to west, that the 99% of us have opportunities, that we create pathways of opportunities through the power of our collective energy. He is the type of man. Dr. King had a quote where he asked the question, or he laid down, what is the measure of a man? The measure of a man is not where he stands in time of comfort or convenience. It's where they stand when it is time to put it all on the line. And we have, and Senator Bernie Sanders, somebody who's been putting it on the line even when it was not popular. He was talking about Medicare for all. Even when it was not popular, he talked about college for all. Even when it was not popular, those of you may remember that in 2010, the senator stood up for 8.5 hours to filibuster the renewal of the Bush tax cuts. He did that. He did that. So he needs you and you and you and you and you and you and you. He needs all of us. Because our mission is so high, we can't get over it. And our mission is so low, we can't get under it. And our mission is so wide, we cannot get around it. When he says not me, us, he means just that. And in order to take on Wall Street and the pharmaceutical industry and other corporations and people who just don't want to see the rest of us to live a good life, we need to be a team because it takes teamwork to make the dream work. So as I bring on the senator, can you do something for a sister from Cleveland, Ohio? Can you do something for me? If you are able, can you raise one hand for yourself and raise the other hand for somebody else, because we are in this together. And with these hands, sisters and brothers, we will have Medicare for all. With these hands, we will have college for all. With these hands, we will take care of Mother Earth. With these hands, we will ensure that our young people are not saddled with trillions of dollars worth of debt. With these hands, we will take care of our elders who deserve to be taken care of. With these hands, we will create a community that understands that we have a criminal justice system that has been far too unjust. With these hands, we will restore voting rights all across this country. And with these hands, we will bond together to do what is just, what is right, and what is good. And lastly, with these hands, we will elect Senator Bernie Sanders, the next president of the United States of America.
Whoa! Thank you, Fairfield. Oh. Well, we've squeezed a lot of people into this room. Thank you all very much for coming. And let me love you too. And I love this state, and whether you like it or not, you're going to see a lot of me in the next few months. So, I want to thank Chris Evergreen for her remarks, Diane Rosenberg for her remarks, Francis Thick for her remarks. Thicky, okay. And I want a special thanks. Bring out Nina. Where's Nina? Nina, where are you? Oh, she's back there. All right, she's back there. But Nina has been running all over this country, doing maybe the most important work that anybody can do. And that is she has been getting people, often young people, people of color, but all people, involved in the political process to retake our democracy and tell corporate America they will not continue to own this country. So, Nina, thank you very much. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to bore you to death with a long speech, but I need to tell you why I'm running for president and why we've got to win this election. But before I do that, I want to do something that actually I have never done before. And that is, I know that in Iowa and, in fact, in Vermont, which, as all of you know, is a very rural state, but all over this country, rural communities are really hurting. We're seeing family farmers going out of business every day. We're seeing schools shut down or consolidate. We're seeing an incredible concentration of ownership in agriculture. We're seeing fewer and fewer processes controlling one sector of agriculture after another. We're seeing people from outside of the United States buying more and more agricultural property in this country. Now, coming from a rural state, I happen to believe that the rural way of life is a good way of life. I mean, there's something to be said about knowing everybody in town. You can have, with proper funding, we can have great schools. With the new technology, small schools can be plugged into Harvard University and get any course that the kids want. We can have good rural health care. We can and must have broadband in every community in this country. I mean, I don't know how a community in Iowa or Vermont attracts small businesses if you don't have good cell phone service, if you don't have good broadband. We got to do that as well. But this issue of the decline of rural America, the fact that something like 60% of rural counties in this country are now depopulating, is a crisis that we have got to deal with. And I promise you that during this campaign, we are going to talk about it a whole lot. And we are going to develop a policy and a set of programs. And this is tough stuff. I mean, there's no magical solution. But this is an issue that has to be dealt with, and we will deal with it. We've got some people beginning to do some good research on it. I want to do something, though, that I have never done really before, and I want to bring up somebody here because this issue is so important that I want to bring up Dr. John Eichert. I don't know if any of you know John. You know. And I want John to kind of frame the issue, talk about what is going on for a few minutes and what he thinks we should be doing. And after he speaks, I'll get the mic back, and then we can talk about how we're going to transform this country, not only rural America, but the entire country. So let me introduce John Eichert. John.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. To many of you, I'm not unfamiliar here in Fairfield. I want to start by saying I grew up on a small family farm down in southwest Missouri. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the University of Missouri, and I was educated as an agricultural economist. And after I got my PhD, I went out and worked for 30 years in 4 different agricultural colleges at the large land-grant universities. The first half of that academic career, I was a promoter of industrial agriculture, factory farms, things of this nature. I thought as an economist that if we made agriculture more economically efficient, it was going to be good not only for the farmers that we created opportunities, it would be good for rural communities. You know, it would be good for the land. Farmers could afford to take care of the land, and everything was going to be great. And most important, we were going to make good food affordable for everyone. We were going to eliminate hunger. During the 1980s, I began to question that because I was at the University of Georgia at that time, and that was the middle of the farm financial crisis. And we were working with farmers, and the farmers were losing their farms because of record high interest rates and large debts that had been put upon them. And the farmers that were in the biggest trouble were the ones that had been doing what we so-called experts had been advising them to do. They had gotten big rather than get out, and now they were losing their farms. That wasn't the kind of agriculture that I set out to create. That wasn't the kind of environment I set out to create. The farmers not only, they didn't want to leave the land, and we assumed that farming was drudgery and they'd go somewhere else and find a better living, but they didn't. And some of them committed suicide when they lost those farms that had been to them. And I said, there's something fundamentally wrong. It wasn't working for family farmers. It wasn't working for the rural communities that depended upon those farm families. And only later I discovered it wasn't working for the land with the pollution of agriculture, of the environment, the water and the air with agricultural, biological, and chemical waste. It wasn't working for anyone, so I had to fundamentally change. I've come to the conclusion over the years of moving in a fundamentally different direction that what was happening then and what is happening now is the economic colonization of our rural areas all across this country. What we're seeing is our rural areas are treated like economic colonies where we bring in outside investments, convince the people that they can't develop their own communities and their own economies. Bring in the outside investment, but the outside investors basically extract the wealth from rural areas. They pollute the environment. They degrade the quality of the land. And when the family farmers are forced off of the land, then the rural communities dry up and die, the towns. It takes people, not just production and profits, to support rural communities. It takes people to shop on Main Street. It takes people not to just buy agricultural supplies, but to buy shoes and clothes and haircuts and things of this nature. And it takes people to keep the schools open. It takes people to be on volunteer fire departments and do other things. And we basically are extracting and exploiting the wealth of rural communities, and it's going to a handful of multinational corporations that increasingly control agriculture. What we must have is a fundamental change in farm policy to support a sustainable agriculture that restores local control, that allows people that have those. We need to create agricultural policies that don't subsidize and support the industrialization and exploitation of rural communities, that support people that have those traditional values of family farmers, that farming is not just a business, it's a way of life, and that farmers can be good members of community and good stewards of the land when they have the economic means to do so. I believe that Bernie Sanders today has that kind of commitment and the kind of persistence that is our best hope for fundamentally changing farm policy, rural policy, and fundamentally restoring the integrity, the social and economic and ecological integrity to our rural areas. Thank you very much.
And I want to tell you, thank you, John. I asked John to speak about 8 minutes ago. So that's pretty good. All right, so this is an issue that we're going to stay on, because this is an issue not just for Iowa, not just for Vermont. This is an issue for rural America. We are going to stop the decline of rural America, and we're going to work together to do that. And before I get going, I also want to say hello to President Trump. And, you know, I made a joke about this the other night. I'll repeat. You ready to hear a slightly worn joke? It's a day old, but it was a pretty good joke. This was the joke. The joke was that, as you know, a couple of days ago, Donald Trump, who is clearly a stable genius, because he has told us that, and he never lies, so it must be true. A genius and stability, yes, that is Donald Trump. Anyhow, after years and years of deep scientific research, Donald Trump, uniquely on this planet, has concluded that wind turbines cause cancer. Now, this is really significant. I mean, you got all these researchers out there. We have National Cancer Institute. We have all these people working on trying to deal with this horrible illness. And Donald Trump, all by himself, while he's busy running to the southern border, he has discovered that wind turbines cause cancer. And here I was, you know, we were in Washington planning the trip. And I said, do I want to come to a state where 35% of your electricity comes from wind turbines? Where all over the state you got wind turbines. My staff and I, people are going to come down with cancer after a few days in Iowa. But we are brave souls. And here we are. All right. All right. The other thing that I do want to say on a more serious note, and if Trump is watching, on Thursday, the House of Representatives passed a very significant resolution. It's a resolution that we wrote in the Senate and passed it a few weeks before that. And what that resolution was about was getting American troops out of the Saudi-led war in Yemen. And that bill was passed in a bipartisan way in the Senate and in a bipartisan way in the House by a good vote. And what that resolution recognizes is that Yemen right now is suffering the worst humanitarian disaster on earth. Tens of thousands of children have already starved to death, and the experts fear very much that there could be widespread famine with millions of people literally facing starvation. All of this is a result of the Saudi-led intervention in the civil war in Yemen. So our view was that instead of bombs for the people of Yemen, we need humanitarian aid for the people of Yemen. But the second part of that resolution was equally important, and that is, for the first time in 45 years, the War Powers Act was successfully utilized to get American troops out of a war that was unauthorized and unconstitutional. Now, the truth is, and this is why this is a big deal, all of you know that the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, is pretty clear. It is the Congress, not the President, who has the power to put American troops into harm's way. It is the Congress that has the authority for making war, not the President. But the truth is that under Democratic and Republican administrations, for a long, long time, that congressional responsibility has been abdicated. And this vote that just took place in the House and the Senate over the last 2 weeks is the first time in the modern history of this country where the Congress is now reclaiming its constitutional responsibility. And that is a big deal. And on that resolution, I worked in the Senate with a very conservative Senator, Mike Lee of Utah, who feels very strongly, Mike and I disagree on everything, but he feels, on this one he's right, he feels very strongly about the Constitution and the responsibility of Congress to take that Constitution seriously. So we worked together, we passed it in the Senate, they passed it in the House, and now it's on the President's desk. And I would say this, you know, Trump has talked about his aversion to never-ending wars, and he's right. We have, God knows, been in wars all Afghanistan and Iraq forever. I don't want to get into that at great length. You all know that stuff. But I really hope that the President does not veto this legislation. Mr. President, sign that important piece of legislation. And now, after 3 hours, let me talk about what I came here to talk about originally. And that is why I'm running for President of the United States. All right. Donald Trump has done something which no president has ever done in the modern history of this country, even conservative presidents. And that is, for cheap political gain, what he has done and is trying to do today is to divide our nation up based on the color of our skin, based on where we were born, based on our sexual orientation, based on our gender, based on our religion. And I think, you know, honest people can have different disagreements about health care. I'm going to talk about that, education, climate change, all that stuff. But the function of a president of the United States is to bring people together, not to divide them up. And that is what this campaign is about, and it's what our presidency will be about. So I want to welcome all of you to a campaign which says loudly and proudly that the underlying principles of our government will not be greed. I'm sick and tired of the greed that we see in this country. This greed is a true disease, and people have written about it. You know, alcoholism, a disease. Drug addiction, a disease. And yet this desire on some of these billionaires, I mean, how many billions of dollars do you need to feed your family? Enough really is enough. And we're going to take on that greed. We're going to take on the hatred coming from the White House and we're going to take on the lies. Our campaign and our government will not be based on racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, or religious bigotry. The principles of our government will be based on a very, very old principle, a principle which literally goes back through the Bible, goes back throughout human history, and that is justice. Justice. And when I'm talking about justice, I'm talking about economic justice, I'm talking about social justice, I'm talking about racial justice, and I am talking about environmental justice. You know? And environmental justice means that people in Iowa and elsewhere in this country should not have to be smelling manure 24 hours a day. And tonight, I want to welcome you to a campaign which tells the powerful special interests who control so much of our economic and political life that we will no longer accept the greed of Wall Street, corporate America, and the billionaire class, greed which has resulted in this country having more income and wealth inequality than almost any major country on earth, and creating a situation which is worse today than in any time since the 1920s. Now, you're not going to see this discussed on TV. You're not going to hear too much on the radio. But here is a reality that this campaign and our government will address. It is not acceptable to me, nor I think the majority of the American people, that the three wealthiest families in America, 3 families, own more wealth than the bottom half of American people. You know, when we were kids, we studied, you studied about what goes on around the world and different types of governments and societies. And your teacher told you about oligarchy here and oligarchy there, and a few families control the economy and the politics of those countries. Well, that is precisely what is happening in America today. We are moving in the direction of oligarchy, and together we are going to turn that around. We will no longer accept 49% of all new income going to the top 1%. That's the economy today. Economy is doing great for the 1%, not so great for ordinary Americans. 49% going to the top 1%, while in Iowa, Vermont, and all over this country, millions of people are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table. And we're just in Burlington a few hours before, and a guy stood up and said, I worked at McDonald's, make $9 an hour. Nobody can make it on $9 an hour or $10 an hour. And furthermore, we don't talk about this. You know why the American people are stressed out? I go all over the country, and I go all over my own state. People are stressed. And one of the reasons they are stressed is that half of the American people are living paycheck to paycheck. I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, and I know what that did to our family. And what paycheck to paycheck means is that millions of people today are scared to death that their car might break down. And if their car breaks down, they can't get to work. The boss doesn't want to hear an explanation. They can't get to work. They don't get to work, they get fired. They get fired, they can't take care of their kids. People living under incredible stress. People are living paycheck to paycheck, scared that their kid will get sick. And they don't have enough money to take that kid to the doctor. And God forbid the kid ends up in the hospital, your family faces financial ruin. Millions of families are in that boat. In the richest country in the history of the world, we could do a hell of a lot better economically than that. And I want to say something to the young people, and that is, in the wealthiest nation on earth, unless we turn this around, our kids, for the first time in modern American history, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. See, and that baby understands that. That baby is nervous about that. And he or she has a right to be nervous. Just think about it. How does it happen? Just, you know, what we try to do in this campaign is think outside of the box. Take a step backwards. So here you have an explosion in technology. Everybody knows that. Huge increase in worker productivity. How does it happen that our kids are earning less in real dollars than their parents? How does it happen that our kids are leaving school deeply in debt? That our kids can't afford to get an apartment or a house or buy a car? I got 4 kids, beautiful kids, 7 beautiful grandchildren. We believe that this country should move upwards, not downwards. And that's the economy we're going to create. But it's not just an economy that we have to create that works for all people. We have to take a very hard look at a corrupt political system. That's what it is. I can't use any other word. It is a corrupt system. I come from a small rural state. Your state is a little bit larger. But what we believe is one person, one vote. We believe in old-fashioned democracy. You disagree with me? Fine, vote against me. Let majority rule. Let's have a serious debate about the issues. What I do not believe is that billionaires should be allowed to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. That's not democracy. And what that means is we will overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And we will move to public funding of elections. I don't care what your political views are. You're a conservative, you're a progressive, whatever. You have a right to run for office without being beholden to wealthy campaign contributors. We're going to end this outrageous gerrymandering that we see in communities all over this country. And we are going to take on Republican governors who are suppressing the vote. You know, you're looking at somebody who has run for office many, many times in Vermont. And sometimes I've lost, most of the times I've won. But honestly, and I think this is true for most people who run for office, it had never occurred to me in Vermont to say, hey, we're weak up in that part of the state. How do I create a situation where we make it harder for people to vote because they may vote against me? But that is exactly what's going on all over this country. All right? So I say to those cowardly Republican governors, and they are cowards, if you are not prepared to engage in a free and fair campaign, get the hell out of politics and get another job. You know, what a campaign is supposed to be is about ideas. I got my ideas, other people have different ideas. That's fine. That's called democracy. Take your ideas to the people. And if they agree with you, they'll vote for you. If they don't, they won't. But don't make it harder for people to vote because they may vote against you. And I want to give a special thanks tonight to the people of Iowa, because in 2016, the last time I was through, this is where the political revolution began. Thank you, Iowa. No, it's not. No. It's not Bernie. It's you. Okay. But this is what happened, and I, don't mean to overstate it, but what Iowa did was extremely important. This is why. And it really is not about me. When we came here to Iowa, I think I was 3% in the polls. Nobody knew who I was, junior senator from a small state. See, I'm a junior senator. Don't forget that when they talk about how old I am. The other guy's older, so it's all right. And we came here with a set of ideas that were attacked by the establishment media. I think we had, at one point, 16 articles in the Washington Post in a 24-hour period attacking us. That's kind of an old-time world's record. And we were, criticized by people in the Democratic Party and certainly Republicans. They said, hey, the ideas that you're talking about, they're crazy. They're extreme. Nobody in America supports these ideas. Raising the minimum wage to a living wage. Whoa! Much too radical. American people won't go for that one. You ready for another one? This is so radical, I'm nervous. I'm even mentioning it. Don't tell anybody I said this, but the idea that we should guarantee health care to all people as a right. Oh, my God. Hey, Bernie, nobody in America thinks that makes sense. Creating up to 15 million jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure through $1 trillion investment. $1 trillion, Bernie, you got to be nuts. Can't afford it. Can't do it. At a time when Republicans want to cut Social Security, we talked about expanding Social Security. Hey, Bernie, nobody is talking about that. The progressives are saying maybe we can prevent cuts to Social Security, but the idea that folks in Iowa and Vermont who are trying to get by on $13,000 a year should get more money, that was too radical an idea. And here's another radical idea. I was asked what I considered to be one of the great national security issues facing this country. It was a national debate. And everybody thought I would say ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And what I said was climate change. And here's another radical idea that we brought forth. We said that if we're going to have a government that represents ordinary people, not just the rich, maybe our candidates should run for office and not have super PACs funded by billionaires. Oh, my God, Bernie, you can't do that. What do you think? You think you can get enough small donations? Can't happen. Impossible. You think you can get $27 per person? Not going to happen. And here's something else that people thought was too radical. And that is, last campaign, before the first vote was cast in the Iowa caucuses, Secretary Clinton had 500 superdelegates lined up behind her. The idea of ending the power of superdelegates at the Democratic convention, much, much too radical. Well, my friends, a funny thing happened in Iowa over the course of that year. Oh, God. Are you all right? You guys all right? Everybody all right? Okay. If you're not, if you're feeling shaky, but my point was that over the course of that campaign, we came in here with 3% of the vote. Well, on caucus night, we ended up with 50% of the vote. And that great start here in Iowa enabled us to eventually win 22 states, over 13 million votes, over 1,700 delegates at the Democratic National Convention, and most importantly, to my mind, we ended up winning more votes from young people than Trump and Clinton combined. And by the way, those ideas that we talked about 4 years ago that seemed so very radical at the time, well, today, virtually all of those ideas are supported by a majority of the American people. And Democratic candidates from school board to President of the United States are now supporting those very ideas. So Iowa, you did it. You helped begin the political revolution in 2016, which is transforming America. And with your help on this campaign, we are going to complete what we began here 4 years ago. So this evening, when we talk about ideas that the American people support, that are needed, tonight we say to the private health insurance companies, whether you like it or not, the United States is going to join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a right. It is not a radical idea to say that all Americans are entitled to go to a doctor when they get sick. It is not a radical idea to say that if, God forbid, somebody ends up in a hospital over a period of time, that that family does not have to go bankrupt. It is not a radical idea to say that there is something fundamentally wrong about the current healthcare system when we are now spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as the people of any other nation, and yet our healthcare outcomes are often not as good. What sense is that? You know, you could argue, say, okay, you got 30 million people uninsured. Many of you are underinsured, yes, with high deductibles and co-payments. And you can say, well, that's the way it is. We don't spend all that much on health care. We are now spending $11,000 per person on health care. Family of four, $28,000. We are paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. This is a dysfunctional healthcare system whose function is to make huge profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies, and together we are going to end that. We're going to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. And today, we say to the Walmarts of the world and to the other low-wage employers, stop paying your workers starvation wages. Here in Iowa and throughout this country, there are millions of workers, and I've talked to people here in Iowa, who are trying to get by on $8, $9, $10 an hour, and you cannot get by on $8, $9, or $10 an hour. Can't do it. Now, 4 years ago when I came in, we talked about $15 an hour as a minimum wage. Seemed to be a radical, crazy idea. Well, guess what? In 4 years, 6 states have passed legislation moving to $15 an hour. And a couple of weeks ago, the relevant committee in the U.S. House reported out a bill for $15 an hour, which will pass the House. It's going to come to the Senate, and we need your help to tell your senators, tell Grassley and Ernst, they have got to support a $15 an hour minimum wage. People can't make it on $9 an hour. It is not a radical idea to say that in our great country, our roads and our bridges, and I heard somewhere that Iowa actually has more bridges in disrepair than any state in the country, which surprised me because I thought Vermont had more more bridges in disrepair. But in any case, we need to rebuild our roads and our bridges and our water systems and our wastewater plants. We need the best rail system in the world. With $1 trillion investment, we can put up to 15 million people to work at good wages. How's that? Every psychologist in the world will tell you that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important years of intellectual and emotional development for a human being. That's the fact. And yet in America today, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, and we have a child care system which is in shambles. You are a working parent, mom goes to work, dad goes to work. It is very, very hard in Vermont and in Iowa and all over this country to find quality, affordable child care. And the workers who work in child care often earn wages that are of McDonald's level. We need to respect our children. We need to respect the working parents of this country. We are going to implement universal pre-K for the families of this country. None of this stuff should be seen by anybody as radical. Every study that's out there says that if you invest in the little kids, they do better in school. If they do better in school, they're less likely to drop out and end up doing destructive or self-destructive things. So I believe we invest in our children rather than in jails and incarceration. But it's not just the little children, not just the little children. Let me just tell you, Thursday, I was in D.C., and a dozen folks, young people, came into the office who are in graduate school and are in education. Many of them were working in really challenging public schools. And one guy says, Bernie, you know, I'm getting my master's degree. I am already $180,000 in debt. Okay, I talked to a teacher in Burlington, Vermont. You know, there's another Burlington, not just Iowa. And she said she graduated medical school, $300,000 in debt. Talked to a woman in Des Moines, Iowa, and she said, $300,000 in debt? I graduated dental school, $400,000 in debt. Now, how, I mean, this is not just bad, it is insane. And why do I use the word insane? Everybody here knows the importance of education. We live in a competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world, and we used to have the best educated workforce in the world. That's no longer the case. And that is why I believe that, A, we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. And once again, oh, that was a radical idea 4 years ago. Well, pay attention to what's happening all across this country. Governors, mayors are moving in that direction. And in addition to that, let me ask you a question. How many people in this room are dealing with student debt right now? I heard that, oh my God, okay. Okay. We're going to either wipe out that debt completely or substantially lower it. All right? Oh, Bernie, what a radical idea. It's very expensive to do all of those things. Yes, we can afford $1.5 trillion in tax breaks for large profitable corporations in the 1%. We can afford to spend $700 billion on the military. We can afford to bail out Wall Street. Oh, but forgive student debt, we just can't afford it. Nonsense. We got to change our priorities in this country. And tonight, we say to the 1% and to the large, profitable private corporations, things are going to change for you when we get into the White House. You're not going to get $1.5 trillion tax break. In fact, you're going to start paying your fair share of taxes. Anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? It's a smart audience. That's right. So take a step back, think about it. Amazon made, I believe, $11 billion in profit last year, tidy sum, owned by the wealthiest guy in America, paid zero in federal taxes. Amazon was not unique. Others are in the same boat. Right now, around the world, as countries struggle for revenue, there are trillions of dollars lying in tax havens in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and in other countries. Our doctrine is that the wealthiest people in this country who never had it so good, the large private corporations that are racking up record-breaking profits, yes, they're going to start paying their fair share of taxes. Now, Donald Trump, that great scientist, that stable genius, after years of intensive research, has concluded that climate change is a hoax. Well, the American people know differently. The American people know that climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity, and climate change is already today causing devastating problems in the United States of America and throughout the world. Our job is not just to take on Trump, but to take on the fossil fuel industry. An industry that lies just like their leader in the White House all of the time. Now, I want to tell you a personal story. I was just thinking about this the other day. I am older than most of you, and I can remember the TV ads from the tobacco industry. I can remember, and maybe some of you have seen them, where you had doctors literally getting on television, smoking a cigarette and said, this is a great cigarette, it's good, literally healthy for you, and so forth and so on. So you had the tobacco industry that actually knew that cigarettes cause cancer and emphysema and heart disease and everything else, and they lied. My father died at the age of 59. He smoked 2 packs a day. Millions of people died in this country and are still dying all over the world because of the lies of the tobacco industry. And that's an issue we have to deal with. But it is exactly the same situation with regard to the fossil fuel industry and climate change. Their scientists know exactly what fossil fuel emissions are doing to our planet, and they have spent millions and millions of dollars trying to obfuscate the issue. Well, there are 2 sides, we're not sure. Well, we are sure. Climate change is a threat to this planet, and our job is to take on the fossil fuel industry and their lies. Our job is to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I want to thank the state of Iowa for being one of the leaders in helping us move to sustainable energy. 35% of your electricity comes from wind. Congratulations. This is, I don't know how to describe this issue. All of the issues we're talking about are incredibly important, healthcare and education and decent jobs and all that. But this is an issue that has to do with the future of the planet. I mean, I don't know how much bigger an issue you can have, and we have a moral responsibility to make certain that the planet we leave to our kids and our grandchildren is a planet that is habitable and a planet that is healthy. And that is and by the way, I may be wrong on this, but I think that this issue of climate change, because it is an international issue, it impacts every country on earth, not just an American issue. We can't do it alone, and we are not the only country impacted by it. It may be the mechanism by which we finally bring this entire planet, governments around the world, together, to come together to save the planet. So instead of having a president who is only making a bad situation worse in terms of energy, we together are going to lead the world. We're going to bring the world together to transform this planet's energy system and save the planet. This is the United States of America. We should not be having more people in jail than any other country on earth. Got over 2 million people in jail today. That's more than China, communist authoritarian country, has in jail. People in jail are disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. we need and will bring about real criminal justice reform. Under our administration, there will not be private prisons or detention centers. Under our administration, we will end the so-called war on drugs. Too many lives have been destroyed because people have been arrested for possession of marijuana. And what we are seeking, and again, 4 years ago I was talking about that. Well, now all over this country you're seeing state after state moving to either legalize possession of marijuana or decriminalize it. There are some communities now are doing the right thing. They are expunging the records of people who were arrested for possession of marijuana. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, we are going to change a system in which poor people get arrested and sent to jail for nonviolent crimes, but the crooks on Wall Street who destroyed our economy, not one of them served 1 day in jail. What America is supposed to stand for, they got this on courthouses all over the country: equal justice under the law. That is a fine slogan, but it does not exist now. And that means that whether you're rich or you're poor, you break the law, you pay the price. And today we say that instead of demonizing the undocumented immigrants in this country, we're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. We're going to provide legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program and develop a humane border policy for those who seek asylum. America must never be about snatching babies from the arms of their desperate mothers. That is not what this country should be standing for. During the next many months, there are going to be a lot of folks coming through Iowa, and I'm sure they'll be here in Fairfield as well. And they are going to tell you what they believe they will do, what they want to do when they run for president. And I should tell you that many of them, especially those who are in the Senate, are personal friends of mine. I've known some of them for decades, and without exception, they are good people. And what I promise to do two things. First of all, I am not going to wage any personal attacks on anybody running for the Democratic nomination. We will debate the issues and let the people decide who they want to be their candidate. And second of all, and very importantly, what every Democratic candidate understands is that after this process is completed, and I hope I win, they hope they win, but what is absolutely imperative is that we all come together to defeat Donald Trump. Now, my colleagues and others who I don't know so well who will be coming through Iowa, they're going to tell you what they think, and that's great. That's what democracy is about. And you're going to listen very carefully to what all of the candidates say. But I wanted just to take a moment to tell you exactly what we will be doing if we win this election. And I use the word we advisedly. And the reason I do, and the reason that I think the mantra for our campaign is us, not me, is the following, and maybe that makes us a little bit unique among the candidates. Because I'm going to tell you something that very few people will talk about. And that is that given the nature of power in America today, no president, in my view, no matter how honest or well-intentioned, can do it alone. And the reason for that is that the power of Wall Street, for example, where you have 6 large banks that have assets equivalent to 54% of the GDP. These 6 banks alone control a flow of trillions and trillions of dollars. The power of the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry. When we move to Medicare for all, they are going to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to defend their profits in the drug companies and in the insurance companies. They are enormously powerful. You're going to see ads all over Iowa. Bernie Sanders is terrible. Bernie Sanders is trying to do this, trying to do that. They have unlimited amounts of money. We're going to be taking on the military-industrial complex. All right? I believe in a strong defense, but I don't think we have to spend 10 times as much money on defense as the next 10 nations combined. I would rather use our resources to invest in education and infrastructure and not never-ending wars. So when I say us, not me, what I mean is I need your help to win the Democratic primary. I need your help to win the general election. But I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy. I need your help the day after the election. Because the only way we transform this country is when millions of people come together and are prepared to take on the incredible wealth, greed, and power of the 1% and the corporate interest who dominate our economic and political life. That is what we have got to do together. When together we are in the White House, we are going to enact a federal jobs guarantee. There is so much work to be done in America, rebuilding our infrastructure, transforming our energy system, creating the best child care and education system in the world. There is so much work to be done in health care. Medicare for all will mean more health care workers. As we age as a nation, we need more people to take care of our seniors. There is more than enough important work to do, and we will guarantee jobs for anyone prepared to do that work. When we are in the White House together, we will move aggressively to end the epidemic of gun violence in this country. I come from a rural state where there are a lot of hunters and a lot of gun owners. You are in the same position. But the vast majority of Americans, including gun owners, understand that we need common sense gun safety legislation, and we're going to pass that. When we are in the White House, and I know that this is a controversial issue here in Iowa, we are going to protect a woman's right to control her own body. Now, I know people who are pro-life, people who are friends of mine, and we disagree about that issue. And honest people can disagree about it. But this is what I have never understood. I have never understood how we have the Republican leadership of this country saying that they want small government, they want to get government out of people's lives. They want the American people to do anything they can without that big, bad government interference, except if you are a woman. Now, you may be pro-choice, and I have 100% lifetime pro-choice voting record. You may be pro-life. But that decision must be with the woman, not with the federal government, not with the state government, not with the local government. When we are in the White House together, we are going to address not only the disparities of wealth and income that exist in our nation, but we will address the racial disparities that exist as well. Together, we're going to take on one of the great stains in American history, and we are going to root out and defeat institutional racism wherever it exists. What this campaign is about is not just a long list of issues that are important to working families. What this campaign is about is a political revolution. And that means not only fundamentally changing the priorities of the United States government so that we have policies that work for the middle class and working families and the 40 million people who are living in poverty, and not policies which reflect the interest of the 1% or the billionaire class. But more importantly, when we talk about a political revolution, it means transforming our political system and bringing millions of people into active political activity. Okay? Now, some of you may have read recently that we have raised a considerable amount of money in the last 6 weeks since we've been in the campaign, and I'm proud of that. And our average contribution used to be $27; it's gone down to $20. And the reason for that, by the way, is that we've got a lot of young people who are now putting in a little bit of money in the campaign, and I think that's great, and I'm very excited about that. So the media, the media has talked about it, and it's important. Money is important, and we're proud that we have now, I think, over 500,000 people who have already contributed to the campaign. But I'll tell you something that, to me, honestly, is more important. Hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and that is we have about 1.1 million Americans in every state in this country who have volunteered to roll up their sleeves and to get involved in this campaign on a volunteer basis. And that is what the political revolution is about. In the old days, not so long ago, what a campaign was about, instead of me being here, you'd have candidates talking to you, you'd have candidates running to rich people's living rooms and raising all kinds of money, hiring a consultant, and use that money to put 30-second ads on television. That was called a political campaign. Well, we're going to do it just a little bit differently. All right? We're not running to any rich people's living room. Never have, never will. All right? We'll raise our money in small individual contributions. But most importantly, instead of relying on a small number of wealthy people, we are going to rely on over 1 million people at the grassroots level. At the end of the day, when we talk about the 1%, that is what they are, 1%. We are the 99%. And last I heard, I may not be a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician, but there are a hell of a lot more people in the 99% than there are in the 1%. So they may have unlimited amounts of money, which they do. They may have a whole lot of power, which they do. But we have something that they don't have. We have the people. And if we don't allow Donald Trump to divide us up based on the color of our skin, based on our country of origin, based on our sexual orientation, based on our religion, based on our gender. If we bring our people together around an agenda that works for working families, not only are we going to win the Democratic primary, not only are we going to win the general election, together we are going to transform this country and create an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. So Fairfield, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. This is a wonderful, wonderful turnout. And together, let's go forward and make a political revolution. Thank you all very much.
Any other major country on earth, a nation in which the wealthiest people are becoming phenomenally rich, while we have over 40 million people living in poverty. The very least that we can say is that nobody in America goes.
The Pied Piper Bernie Sanders for the middle class. What a GOP wants to put our interests last. He's gonna give it to you raw, no hesitation. With the right ideas to lead this great nation. No handouts, no special interest groups. He don't lie to give votes, he's telling you the truth. And while the media wants to downplay him, he still gon' fight. Tell him all he ain't playing. Push him for higher wages so we all can feed our families. The only one I know who can conquer this insanity of this Wall Street bickering, belittling the poor. Dollar bills, only thing they considering. When people need health care, kids need school. When it comes to politics, Bernie's breaking rules. No attack gets on the competition's needed. He's running on the facts and it's something that we needed. Feel the burn, make him feel the burn. All the way to the White House, feel the burn. Feel the burn, make him feel the burn. Till the haters on the right, they can feel the burn. Feel the burn, make him feel the burn. All the way to the White House, feel the burn.